So in our manifesto, we've set out plans to put an extra £8 billion into the NHS over the next 5 years. So the budget by 2022-23 will be £8 billion higher than it is now. That's a credible plan. It's an affordable plan. So we're putting more resources in, and that will benefit North Norfolk, and I'll be fighting as the local MP, if elected, to make sure that we get the services that we need here. What we've seen from the other parties is uncosted plans from the Labour Party, and obviously the Liberal Democrats won't be forming the government. So it's a choice between a credible costed plan for extra £8 billion a year, or Jeremy Corbyn's plan, which the IFS said yesterday would raise taxes to levels not seen since the Second World War.
There was also concern expressed that the Conservative plans weren't viable either.
Well, I think we've shown over the last Parliament that we said we'd put in more money, and we have done. And we've got a costed plan to deliver that. So there will be more money going in, and we need to make sure we're using that money most effectively. So there is productivity improvements that are needed in the NHS. It's a big organisation. People talk about the layers of management and bureaucracy. So it's about getting the best value for every pound that we put in.
Nobody doubts the quality and commitment of NHS staff. Yet, are you in effect saying that the staff are wrong in what they say, that the service is starved of money?
Well, the facts are there's more money going in. Everyone would always like more money, but there isn't a magic money tree. There's no bottomless pit here. So it's about getting better value for money. So there are practices and things that could be changed, and actually the staff are best placed to deliver those efficiency and productivity improvements so that people get the healthcare that they need.
The Liberal Democrats particularly are arguing that should be parity between physical health and mental health. How far do the Conservatives, do you, go along with that concept?
Well, I don't think it's just a Liberal Democrat thing. I think Jeremy Hunt's been talking about that a lot. So there's been a renewed focus on mental health, which is incredibly important, and I welcome that. And that's something I'd look to champion if I was the MP here. So absolutely, there does need to be that parity. It needs to be recognised in the NHS and actually delivered when people go into the NHS for treatment.
And in terms of welfare and benefits, there doesn't seem to be anybody who'd argue with the fact that the climate is one of austerity, that people are being assessed on their disabilities, and there are some seemingly extraordinary decisions where money's been taken away from people who clearly do have a physical issue, for example. Will there be an end to that sort of thing? Because that's a really strong complaint from our audience.
I think it's incredibly important that the money goes to the people who need it. There have been examples that have been widely reported in the media where people, on the face of it, it does seem an unreasonable decision. And it's the job of an MP to champion those cases and look into them and see if they can be appealed or overturned if people have wrongly lost out to their benefits. But it's important that the money goes to the people who need it. And in the past, there has been people getting money who didn't need it. But it's about getting that balance right.
But are you saying, in effect, that the majority of people who claim benefits aren't justifiably claiming benefits? Or is it that simply isn't allowed to be enough money to go around to help everybody?
No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that people who get it are the ones who need it. And it's making sure they are the right people. And also that where we can, we help people off benefits and move into work. That's the best answer for most people. There will be people who need benefits regardless. But where people can be helped into work and employment, that's good for them, good for their character, good for their self-esteem. So that's what we need to do as well.
And in terms of social care, because that is really the key issue that our audience particularly feel angry and frustrated about, if you like, perhaps you could explain exactly what the Conservative proposal is on social care, because there seems to be a bit of confusion in the earlier days of campaigning. Yes,
very happy to. It's a very important area that people don't misunderstand. So the current situation is that if you've got assets of more than £23,000, then you have to pay for your social care, and that's the only level that's protected. What we're going to do is increase the level of protected assets to £100,000, so that won't be wiped out. No one will have to sell their home to pay for care while they're alive, and also we're going to introduce a cap on the level of fees that people have to pay as well. So these are complicated areas. That's our principles of what we want to do. There'll be full consultation on this and legislation before this comes into effect in 2020. So there's a long time to go to get the detail right, but the principle is we're increasing fourfold the level of assets that are protected for people, and we'll put a cap on the care costs that people have to pay.
You said won't have to sell the house the family home in the current generation effectively, that it's effectively a deferred situation. Firstly, that assumes obviously they're going to have to sell their house, and secondly, that's storing up surely problems for the next generation in terms of inheritance, which has been a fundamental principle of Conservative policy.
Yes, I mean, obviously there's inheritance tax thresholds which will apply in the usual way, but there will be a cap on the costs that people have to pay. So deferred agreements already exist. It's a mechanism that's there for people, so they don't have to worry about moving out of the house. That's left to be sorted out in the future. But it's right that people do make a contribution to their care costs, but we're going to be putting a cap on that so that people who have saved and worked hard don't lose all their assets. They can pass them on to their family and future generations. But our view is that it's right that people make a contribution rather than having the younger generation who are already paying a big tax burden, having more tax put on them. So it's about striking that balance.
And we've been, a number of our viewers have contacted us, having heard about this principle of effectively deferring it to the next generation, and very worried that their son or daughter will not have a home to move into, that they'll effectively could be homeless or in really substandard accommodation when they worked hard to try and stop that happening and give their son or daughter a good future.
Well, what we're saying is we'll guarantee that £100,000 of assets will be protected, which is not the case at the moment. It's £23,000. So people in that situation will be able to leave more, and then there will be a cap on the costs in any event, so that it will depend on the value of the house as to whether that does actually need to be sold or whether they've got other assets that could fund it before it being passed on to the next generation.
Now, on page 63 of the Conservative manifesto, it says, and I quote, "It is wrong to pass on to future generations a bill you cannot or will not pay yourself." You've breached your own principle, haven't you, by saying that it's deferred to the next generation?
Well, this is about people who've got assets and need care. It's right that they do make a contribution, but we don't want people to have to dispose of their house or at that time, so they don't have to worry about it. So it's about people paying for their generation. They'll still be able to pass on assets to future generations.
But you're still deferring the payment, and that's against you. It says in the manifesto, it is wrong. So in effect, you're doing something which your own manifesto says is wrong.
No, I don't think that's right. I think what we're talking about is a deferred payment is still a set payment that someone's making. It's not being passed on to the future generation. The future generation will get £100,000 of protected assets if someone is in the fortunate position, having worked hard, to be able to pass that on.
If you're elected and you have your first surgery, and someone comes to you who's a carer, who's got a job offer, they have to decide on the Monday whether they take it or not, so they've got the weekend to decide. They've been criticised by professionals, for example, as does happen, for having fallen out of love with the person they're caring for. So they've got a really difficult dilemma, and they come to you for help. If you're elected, how would you go about helping them?
I'm not sure
helping them make the decision about whether to accept a job and threaten the care they're giving to the person they care for. How would you deal with that help them through that mixture of incredible emotions?
Well, it's about, if they were to take the job, who would be looking after the person that they're caring for? What's the support that's available? What assessment has been done of those needs? And what can be delivered for them? And I think the approach we've put in through the Care Act is about bringing together, hopefully, the organisations, whether it's the local authorities or the NHS, to look at support for people. I'd want to understand what that person's individual situation was. Obviously, you wouldn't want to encourage anyone to put someone they're caring at risk if they were taking a job. So there's a lot to weigh up in those sort of situations, but it really comes down to the individual case and what support would be there to step in behind them.